Welcome to this video on the basics of pistol shooting. My name is Dan Kidder, and I've been a firearms instructor for 27 years and have taught federal agencies, police departments, and regular folks how to be safe and become better shooters for nearly 3 decades. This video is brought to you by Sportsman's Warehouse and is only available for those who have recently purchased a firearm. You may have recently purchased your first firearm or your 100th, but no matter your level of firearms experience, everyone can benefit from additional instruction. This video is the second part of a series of videos produced to help you become safer, more proficient, and more confident in using your firearm. Please make sure you watch the first video, The Basics of Gun Safety, before proceeding with this video. A link to that video is in the description below. By watching this video, you affirmatively agree to assume all liability for your use of this information and agree to hold Sportsman's Warehouse and me harmless for your use or misuse of this information. The information contained in this video is for educational purposes only, and the user assumes all responsibility for how it is used. Before we get into how to use your pistol, it's helpful to understand the various parts of the gun and how they work. The basic components of the pistol are the frame, the barrel, the chamber, the slide, the magazine, and the action. The frame of the gun is the backbone to which all of the other parts are attached. It includes the grip, which is what the shooter holds onto, contains the action, which makes the gun function, the barrel, which contains and directs the projectile as it fires, the sights, which are used to aim the firearm, and the slide, which moves to load the gun and eject the spent casing each time the gun is fired. The barrel is a metal tube through which the bullet passes on its way to the target. The inside of the barrel is called the bore, and it contains the rifling, which are a series of spiral-cut grooves that impart spin to the bullet as it passes down the barrel to give it improved stability in flight. The rotation of the bullet helps the bullet be more accurate and also increases the distance and velocity. The distance across the diameter of the raised portion of the rifling, called the lands, is the caliber of the bullet that can be fired from the barrel. If this diameter is 9 millimeters, the gun can fire a 9 millimeter caliber bullet. If it is 22 hundredths of an inch, it is a .22 caliber. This only tells you the diameter of the bullet and not which cartridge it fires. The chamber is found at the rear of the barrel and is a section that is cut to the same dimensions as the cartridge. This holds the cartridge in place in alignment with the barrel and also prevents it from deforming from the expanding gases when it's fired so that it can reliably extract and eject from the gun. The slide on a semi-automatic is a portion of the top of the gun that slides back and forth. It's held in the closed position by the recoil spring that rides on a recoil spring guide rod inside of the slide. The slide operates on rails that keep it attached to the frame and lets it move to operate the firing sequence. Upon initial loading of all semi-automatics, the first cartridge must always be manually cycled into the firing chamber by retracting the slide and then releasing it. As the slide returns to the closed position, it removes the cartridge from the top of the magazine and inserts it into the chamber. Most semi-automatics use an ammunition storage device called a magazine. Sometimes this is mistakenly referred to as a clip, but a clip is something different than a magazine. A magazine holds the cartridges in position and has a spring that pushes the rounds upwards so that they can be loaded into the chamber. The action is a series of parts, pins, and springs that work together to let the firearm fire. It includes the trigger, the hammer or internal firing mechanism, and any other moving parts that are involved in firing the gun. The cartridges are loaded into the magazine. The cartridges are aligned so that the rear of the case is inserted underneath the feed lips of the magazine. These feed lips retain the cartridge to keep it from falling out of the magazine. The first round inserted into the magazine presses down on the follower, and every other round presses down on the cartridge beneath it. The first cartridge will be easy to load, and each additional cartridge will become just a little harder as the spring in the magazine gets compressed more. One place a round being loaded into the magazine can hang up is if the base of the cartridge catches on the lip where the bullet meets the case on the cartridge below the one being loaded. You need to find the sweet spot behind this lip and in front of the feed lips of the magazine. Once the magazine has been loaded to its capacity, it is then inserted into the magazine well inside the grip of the pistol with the bullets facing toward the muzzle of the gun. Give it a firm smack to ensure that it is fully seated. To load the pistol, you must work the slide to strip around from the magazine and insert it into the chamber. This is done by grasping the slide firmly and pulling it fully back until it stops and then letting it go. If the slide is not pulled fully back, it may not catch the rear of the cartridge and it will not be able to push it into the chamber. The pistol is now loaded. When the gun is fired, by disengaging the safeties and pulling the trigger, the bullet is pushed down the barrel and exits the gun at a high rate of speed. The expanding gases push the slide backwards. When the slide moves to the rear, an extractor grips the rim of the case and pulls it from the chamber. An ejector impacts the edge of the case and pushes it at an angle toward the ejection port and out of the gun. As the slide returns, it automatically pushes another round from the magazine and into the chamber. After the initial loading, the gun will automatically fire and load a single round. Because the gun only fires one round with every pull of the trigger, it's called a semi-automatic. When the slide is forward, it seals the breech of the gun, preventing the hot expanding gases from coming back toward the shooter until the bullet leaving the barrel allows the gases to escape. The condition of the breech being sealed is called in battery. If the gun fails to go into battery, the gun is unable to fire. When the gun is in battery, the breech face pushes the cartridge from the rear, holding it in place, ready to fire. Pulling the trigger with the safeties disengaged allows the firing pin, located in a small hole in the middle of the breech, to extend and strike the primer on the base of the cartridge. This ignites the impact-sensitive chemical contained inside, and this ignites the powder inside the case. This burning powder expands the air at a high temperature and propels the bullet out of the barrel. There are two primary types of safety mechanisms on a modern pistol: passive and active. Passive mechanisms are often internal to the gun and prevent the gun from firing when the gun is dropped. They are moved out of position when the trigger is pulled. They may also be external to the gun and are engaged in the normal operation of the gun, like this grip safety. Some guns have decocking levers that safely drop the hammer while blocking the firing pin. Active safeties require the shooter to actively disengage the safety so that the gun can fire. These can be a button under the trigger guard, a lever on the slide, or a catch at the top of the grip. Check your owner's manual for the location of any safeties on your gun and how to operate them. Also, keep in mind that a safety mechanism is a mechanical device and it can fail. Use of a safety does not negate the need for safe firearms handling that we discussed in the first video on the basics of gun safety. Most modern semi-automatic pistols come in one of three types of actions: single action, double action, or double action only. In a single action pistol like this model 1911, the hammer must be manually placed under spring tension or cocked in order for the gun to fire. Simply pulling the trigger when the hammer is not cocked will not let the gun fire. When the trigger is pulled on a single action pistol, the trigger only performs one action. It lets the hammer fall and strike the firing pin. With a traditional double action pistol, the trigger performs two actions. It cocks the pistol and then lets the hammer fall. These guns will fire, and the action of the slide moving to the rear will also cock the pistol. For this reason, traditional double action pistols are often referred to as DASO because they will fire in both double action and single action conditions. The third category is the double action only pistol. As with the traditional double action pistol, the trigger will bring the hammer to the rear and then release it to fire. The difference is that when the gun fires and the slide comes to the rear, the hammer does not stay back. The difference between single action and double action is the amount of force needed to pull the trigger. In single action condition, the amount of pressure to pull the trigger may be 2 or 3 pounds. In double action condition, the amount of pressure may be 6 to 8 pounds. A single action trigger pull is also much shorter than the typical double action. Another category of pistols that are very popular for concealed carry are the striker-fired pistols. These pistols often have a polymer frame and are known for their reliability and ease of use. Instead of using a traditional hammer to strike the firing pin is attached to a striker that moves to the rear and is released when the trigger is pulled. The action of the pistol firing causes the slide to move to the rear and resets the striker so that it can fire the next round. Because the striker must be reset with each shot, this type of pistol is considered a single-action pistol, as the trigger cannot be pulled a second time without resetting the striker. We've touched on loading a semi-automatic pistol a bit already, but let's look a bit more in depth. To load a semi-automatic pistol, you first load the magazine. It may be helpful at first to press the base of the magazine into a table while inserting the cartridges into the top. Press the first cartridge down in front of the small feed lips that prevent the cartridge from flying back out of the magazine. Press straight down, and once the rear of the case has cleared the feed lips, slide it backwards and under the feed lips. Place the next cartridge forward of the feed lips, but behind the ridge where the bullet and the case meet, and press straight down. Lateral movement can cause the cartridge you're trying to load to roll off the round surface of the cartridge below. Continue pushing the cartridge down, which will push the cartridge beneath further into the body of the magazine as the spring compresses. Once the new cartridge is beneath the level of the feed lips, slide it backwards. At first, this will take some practice. The more frequently that you do this, the more you will develop muscle memory and it will get easier. Once the magazine is loaded, you insert it into the grip of the pistol. Make sure that the base of the magazine fits flush with the grip. Give it a firm tap and listen for a click. Tug slightly on the magazine to ensure that it is properly seated and the magazine catch is locked in place. Even though the magazine has been inserted, a semi-automatic is still not loaded and cannot fire until a round is manually loaded from the magazine and into the chamber. To load the pistol, grip the gun firmly in your firing hand, just as if you're going to shoot it. Take your support hand and lay the flat, fleshy part of your supported hand along the rear of the slide while wrapping the 4 fingers of the support hand over the top of the slide. This gives you 5 points of contact on the slide and requires less strength than just pinching the slide between your thumb and forefinger. Grip the rear of the slide with your meaty portion of your hand and your 4 fingers firmly, and a smooth movement, pull the slide to the rear until you feel it come to a complete stop. Looking into the breech of the pistol, you will notice the slide clear the magazine below and a round pop up above the bottom of the slide. At this point, completely release the slide and let it return under spring tension. The slide coming forward will strip a round out of the magazine and will push the cartridge up the feed ramp and into the chamber before locking into battery. Before going on to fire the pistol, there are a few things to mention about cycling the slide. It's very important that you always cycle the slide while holding the pistol in a shooting grip with your strong hand. Passing the gun back and forth from hand to hand provides a greater opportunity that you will drop the gun. Learning to properly cycle the slide while holding the gun in a shooting grip will minimize the risk of dropping the gun. Also, it's very important to pull the slide completely to the rear and then let it go. This allows the slide to move forward under its full potential momentum so that it can slam shut and lock into battery. If you ride the slide or bring your support hand forward with the slide, you will soften the impact of the slide and it may jam the gun or prevent it from locking into battery and it may not fire. Just let it go once you reach its full range of motion. Some types of pistols, known as locking breech action semi-automatics, the slide unlocks from the barrel when you pull it back and the barrel may tilt, pointing upwards. This is normal and allows the feed ramp to move downward, helping the round to move more easily into the chamber. When the slide closes, the barrel will tilt downward and the breech locking will align the barrel so that it is straight. With most semi-automatic pistols, the act of loading also cocks the pistol, placing the hammer or internal firing mechanism under spring tension. With a pistol that has a decocking lever, sometimes called a hammer drop safety, pressing the decocker will safely allow the hammer to drop. If you desire to cock this type of pistol so that you have a lighter and shorter trigger press, you simply use your thumb to pull back on the hammer until the trigger mechanism captures it. Aside from a hammer drop safety, you may also decock a pistol, such as a single action semi-auto, by holding the gun in a firing grip and firmly pinching the hammer on either side to control it from falling forward while you press the trigger. Once the trigger has been pressed, you can ease the hammer forward gently until it rests against the rear of the gun. Note, if you fail to control the hammer as it releases, the hammer will slam into the firing pin and the gun will fire. Pinching the hammer provides more positive control than just using your thumb. The sharp camming action of the hammer coming forward can cause you to lose control of it and the gun can discharge. To unload a semi-automatic pistol, you're essentially reversing the way it was loaded. First, keeping the gun pointed in a safe direction, remove the magazine by depressing the magazine release. This can be found either on the side of the frame near where the thumb rests, along the side of the trigger guard, or at the base of the magazine. Your manual will tell you where it is located on your pistol. With the magazine removed, the gun is still not unloaded. There is still a round in the chamber that must be removed. Tilt the gun sideways and while pressing upward on the slide lock, pull the slide to the rear until the live round is ejected and the slide locks open. Lastly, visually inspect the chamber to ensure that there is no ammunition present in the chamber. The simplest way to clean and maintain your firearm is to take it to your Sportsman's Warehouse store and have them clean and oil it for you under the firearm service plan that you purchased at the time you purchased your gun. If you want to clean and maintain your gun yourself, you'll need to purchase cleaning supplies. You can click here to watch our video on choosing a cleaning kit. Before attempting to clean a gun, verify that it is unloaded and no ammunition is present. I like to store the ammunition in another room or in a drawer so that it does not come into contact with any of the solvents or chemicals that can damage it. Every gun has a different method of disassembly. Your manual will show you how to field strip your gun for cleaning. Field stripping is semi-automatic is taking it apart down to the barrel, slide, frame, and recoil spring assembly. It is not necessary to take the gun apart further. Cleaning is very straightforward. Simply apply either an oil that cleans and lubricates called a CLP or a solvent with a clean patch, let it sit for a bit to dissolve the fouling, then take a clean patch and wipe off the residue. If you choose to use a solvent, you will need to oil the gun according to your manual. You may wish to use a toothbrush or a gun cleaning brush to loosen caked on gunk. I suggest wearing safety glasses while doing this to avoid getting solvent in your eyes. Take a clean patch and apply cleaner to it and use the rod included in your cleaning kit to smear the cleaning fluid inside the bore of the barrel. Take a nylon or bronze brush included in your cleaning kit and work it back and forth inside the bore to remove the carbon and metal from the grooves of the rifling. Wipe it clean with another dry clean patch to remove the fouling. Take another dry clean patch and apply a light amount of oil and smear it inside the bore with your rod. Finally, take a dry patch and use it to sop up any excess oil and apply a thin coat inside the barrel. Your cleaning kit should have various sizes of brushes, jags, and patches to fit snugly inside your barrel. After cleaning and lubrication, reassemble your pistol according to your manual and then perform a function check to ensure that it has been reassembled correctly. Pointing the gun in a safe direction with no ammunition present, work the slide back and forth. Make sure that it slides smoothly and doesn't grind or catch. Lock the slide open, visually inspect the chamber to ensure that no ammunition is present, close the slide, point the gun in a safe direction, and pull the trigger. Make sure that the gun clicks and then recock the firearm and pull the trigger again. If anything fails to work as it is supposed to, something was not assembled correctly. Disassemble the gun and start over again performing your function check after you put the gun back together. Once the gun has been reassembled, wipe the entire pistol down with a clean dry rag to remove fingerprints and any excess oil. Do not apply any cleaners or lubricants to your ammunition, but you can wipe down the magazines. There are 6 fundamentals of pistol shooting. These are grip, stance or position, sight alignment, trigger press, breath control, and follow-through. While I would love to tell you that I can turn you into a great pistol shooter in a short video, I'd be lying. Becoming proficient requires practice, but it is important to know these fundamentals and we can go over them so that you understand how they work together to minimize unnecessary movement at the time that the shot is fired. A proper grip will do the majority of the work for you. Your grip stabilizes the gun, minimizes movement, controls the recoil, and also provides a stable platform for the gun to operate reliably. Your grip should be high on the back strap with your strong hand. You want to hold onto the gun tightly enough to control it when it fires, but not so tightly that your fingers ache and your hand shakes. Next, take your support hand and pivot it at about 45-degree angle forward. Place all of the support hand fingers underneath the trigger guard and wrap it around the strong hand, locking the strong hand in place. You will want both of your thumbs on the same side of the gun and your dominant thumb resting on top of your support thumb with both thumbs pointing toward the target. Apply more gripping force with your support hand than with your strong hand. The tighter you grip the gun, the more benefit you will get in managing recoil and improving accuracy. Some people argue for a 20% grip with the strong hand and an 80% grip with the weak hand, but that is hard to measure, so I simply instruct students to grip harder with their support hand than with their dominant hand. Once you are holding the gun correctly, push forward toward the target with your dominant hand and apply the same amount of force to the rear with your support hand. This push and pull creates dynamic tension that further helps to stabilize the gun. You should also ensure that your wrists are locked. This gives the slide resistance as it moves to allow it to go through its full range of motion for reliable ejection and feeding. If the gun frequently jams, it is likely caused by limp wristing or failing to lock your wrists. For more on grip, check out our video on achieving a proper grip by clicking here. Like all of the fundamentals, achieving a proper shooting stance is geared toward minimizing unnecessary movement. While it is important to achieve a good solid stance in practice, in a defensive encounter getting a proper shooting stance may not be possible, and you may have to fire while leaning around doorways, over car hoods, or from flat on your back. However, achieving a solid shooting platform in practice will help you eliminate the issues of movement and narrow down which other fundamentals are causing you to be less accurate. There are 3 generally accepted stances that are recommended for working on your fundamentals: the Weaver, the Isosceles, and the Modified Isosceles. The Weaver stance resembles a rifle shooting stance. The dominant foot is back and parallel to the target, and the non-dominant foot points toward the target perpendicularly. The feet look very similar to a boxer stance. The non-dominant shoulder is angled toward the target, and the support elbow is bent sharply downward toward the body. For the Weaver stance, the head tilts slightly down to the gun to get your sight picture. The benefit of this position is that you have greater push and pull dynamic tension. It also requires less arm strength to hold the gun out for a prolonged period. This is a great position for those who lack the upper body strength to manage recoil, as the bent arms act as a spring to absorb the recoil better. For the Isosceles stance, both feet point perpendicularly toward the target. The knees are slightly bent, or at the very least are unlocked. You bend slightly at the waist and lean forward toward the target. With the gun held in a proper two-handed grip, the arms are extended forward. The elbows can be locked or unlocked, but you should still push and pull the gun to achieve that dynamic tension. The head is upright and the eyes lock onto the target, and the pistol is raised to the level of the eye. One thing I frequently see students do is arch their backs away from the gun as to hold it farther from their face. A proper Isosceles stance is aggressive and leans forward into the gun, pushing the gun toward the target. I like to tell students to keep their nose over their toes, and when I catch them leaning backwards, I remind them by saying banana. Your weight should be forward on the balls of your feet, and you should be reaching toward the target with the gun as if you were trying to touch the target. The Modified Isosceles is simply achieving the Isosceles position and then stepping back with your dominant leg. This is a bit of a cross between the Weaver and the Isosceles and lets you focus on other fundamentals while achieving a stable platform without getting overly tired from holding the full extension of the Isosceles stance. Those who are practicing for a long time find the stance to be less fatiguing during a long-range session. Sight alignment is placing your eye in alignment with the rear and the front sight. This is different than sight picture, which is the alignment of the sights with your eye and the target. For proper sight alignment, you keep your eyes focused on the target and then move the gun up into alignment with the eyes. Keeping both eyes open if you can, move the gun until the front sight is evenly aligned with the notch in the rear sight. The front sight should be even on top with the rear sight, and the amount of space visible on either side of the front sight when looking through the rear sight should be equal. We like to say equal height and equal light. Your focus should be on the top edge of the front sight, and the rear sight and the target can be slightly out of focus. For those with difficulty focusing or who struggle getting a clean sight picture, you may need to slightly squint your non-dominant eye or close it altogether. Prescription glasses may also help. Another issue that may make it difficult for you to easily achieve proper sight alignment is that your dominant hand and your dominant eye are not on the same side. This is called cross-eye dominance, and it is fairly common. To see which eye is dominant, place both arms out in front of your eyes and make 2 L shapes with your hands. Overlap them to make a small triangle. Look through this triangle and choose a fixed spot in the distance. While keeping that small spot in focus, slowly bring your hands back towards your face until your hands are touching your nose. The small triangle of open space will naturally move toward your dominant eye. If your dominant eye is different than your dominant hand, the fix is fairly easy for shooting a pistol. Either close your non-dominant eye or slightly tilt the gun towards your dominant eye to help it focus on the front sight more easily. Pulling the trigger on your pistol may seem to be a simple concept, but there is much more that goes into it without moving the gun. A proper trigger pull is less of a pull than it is a press. Most semi-automatic triggers have a certain amount of slack in them. You can feel this by dry firing your gun. First, remove any ammunition and verify that your pistol is unloaded. While pointing it in a safe direction, gently pull back on the trigger just until you meet resistance. This is the slack in the trigger. The point where you meet resistance is called the wall. Once you reach the wall with your trigger press, gently begin to increase pressure on the trigger until the gun clicks. While holding the trigger back, use your support hand to cycle the slide. If you have an empty magazine in the gun, take that out before doing this. Now that the gun has been cocked, begin to ease your trigger finger forward until you hear and feel the trigger reset with a click. This is the wall reached from behind rather than the front. At this point, the trigger has been reset as we mentioned earlier, and the gun can be fired again without first removing the slack. Another issue people sometimes have is if they place too much of the finger on the trigger. You want just the very tip of the pad of your finger on the trigger. For a heavier trigger, such as a double action only, you may put more of the pad on the trigger. The key is to avoid wrapping the crease of the finger around the trigger. This will pull the gun off of the point of aim. A simple trick to see how much you are moving the gun when pulling the trigger is to place an empty casing on the top of the slide. Verify that the gun is unloaded, and keeping the gun pointed in a safe direction, place your empty casing upright as far forward on the top of the slide as possible. Pull the trigger and try to keep the casing from falling off the slide. Dry fire practice is a great tool to become better at your trigger press and to help develop a clean, smooth, and consistent trigger press. Breath control is controlling your breathing at the time that you make the shot. Breathing can move the upper body up and down and cause the gun to move with your breaths. To control your breathing when shooting, take in a normal breath and then let out a little to be comfortable. Hold your breath at the time that you make the shot. Then exhale and repeat the process. Learning to do this properly will be especially important in a stressful encounter, as your respiration rate will increase rapidly. Follow through is keeping everything exactly the way that it was at the time the shot was fired. With proper follow through, you will see the gun rise with the natural recoil of the shot being fired, but you do not push the gun forward, tighten your grip, or move your body. It's common for people to want to see the target, so they'll often lift their head quickly to see where they hit. It's also common for the shooter to anticipate the recoil and push the gun forward. This can cause the shots to hit low on the target or to miss the target completely. Another issue I frequently see is because the shooter knows the gun is going to recoil, they will tighten their grip at the last second. With a proper grip and a proper amount of grip strength, it's not necessary to tighten your grip further when you pull the trigger. This will move the gun as the shot breaks. The best way to become more proficient is to practice with intention and master your fundamentals. You can watch our videos on getting the most from your range time by clicking here. Intentional practice means working on a specific fundamental skill in your time at the range. Identify an area that needs improvement and slowly and deliberately focus on that particular fundamental. For trigger press, safe dry fire practice with an unloaded gun pointed in a safe direction is a tool that is used by the best professional shooters. A tool that is great for helping with your dry fire practice is snap caps from Azoom. They help cushion your firing pin to protect it from damage. These are also great for practicing loading magazines, and you can insert them randomly into your magazine during live fire practice to diagnose if you're shoving the gun forward when you shoot. One key skill is the ability to clear a malfunction. A malfunction can be caused by faulty ammunition, a dirty or poorly maintained pistol, and frequently because of incorrect body mechanics. The main thing to keep in mind when clearing a malfunction is that the goal is to get the bad out and get the good in. In a gunfight, you will use what is known as an immediate action drill. For an immediate action drill, you tap the magazine and quickly rack the slide. Tapping the magazine ensures that the magazine is fully seated. A common cause of malfunctions is either a magazine that wasn't properly inserted or locked in position so that the slide coming forward is unable to strip a live round into the chamber, or a magazine that has become dislodged by unintentionally hitting the magazine release. In this case, the gun functions properly, firing the round in the chamber, but cannot load another round because the magazine is moved out of position. The slide then closes on an empty chamber, and your first indication that the gun is not loaded is when you pull the trigger and the gun goes click. Another common cause of malfunctions is when the slide fails to cycle fully and the gun fails to go into battery. This is frequently caused during shooting by the strong wrist not being fully locked. The slide needs the resistance of a locked wrist to fully cycle. During loading, this is often caused by not letting the slide go, but instead riding the slide back. This slows the slide down and doesn't let it fully engage into battery. Movement at the time that the shot is fired can cause a fired round to turn upright in the ejection port. This is called a stovepipe. It's easy to just tap and rack while turning the gun on its side to remove the fired case and insert a fresh round into the chamber. A more difficult malfunction to clear is when an unfired case is not extracted from the chamber and the cycling slide tries to feed another round. This is called a double feed, and the problem is that the new round may still be beneath the feed lips of the magazine, half in and half out. Meanwhile, the case is expanded into the chamber and the slide is pushing the live round into the base of the fired round. To fix this, it may be necessary to pull back on the slide, and then pressing the magazine release with your dominant hand thumb, you pull sharply down on the magazine. This will often strip out the live round and allow the case in the chamber to fall out. If the case does not fall out, then cycle the slide a few times to try to get the extractor to grab the rim of the case and pull it out. If it does not come out, then it is likely that your extractor is broken and needs to be replaced by a gunsmith. During practice, the simplest way to clear a malfunction is to remove the magazine, move the slide back and forth rapidly while turning the gun on its side so the ejection port is pointing toward the ground. If you have difficulty removing the magazine, you may need to pull back on the slide while activating the magazine release and pulling down on the slide. This can be done by gripping the gun in an armorer's grip like this and using your support hand to remove the magazine. Through intentional practice of the fundamentals, dry fire, and learning to properly load, unload, cock, and decock the pistol, you can build your skill and become more proficient with your pistol. The key aspect of training is to be safe with your firearm, and if you haven't already, I suggest watching our first video in this series, The Basics of Gun Safety, before you proceed to practice. There's a link in the description, or you can click here. And while a video is a great way to get information, nothing beats a hands-on class. Every Sportsman's Warehouse store in the nation offers concealed carry classes, and even if you are not wanting to get your concealed carry permit, these classes are a great place to start for learning gun safety and the basics of using your pistol. Check with your local customer service desk for information on the next class. Thank you for watching this video, and if you're interested in learning more, be sure to watch our other videos in this series on the basics of rifles, basics of shotguns, and basics of revolvers. We'll have links in the description below. Shoot straight, be safe, and have fun.